All right, so on behalf of Flagler Cares and One Voice for Volusia, well, sorry, something happened, there we go. Oh, let me admit some more real fast, okay. Welcome once again to the 2021 Health and Human Services Summit. My name is Dale Schuberg and I will be the moderator of this session. You have joined the session titled Mindfulness 101, and I will be the moderator of the session. All participants will be muted during the session. There will be a Q&A time at the end of this session for you to pose questions. You may raise your hand using the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. We will then call on you and allow you to unmute yourself. You may also submit questions during the training in the chat box, and we will pose them to the trainer throughout the session and at the end of the session if time allows. If you have requested CEUs for this session, please make sure that your camera remains on throughout the session. Thank you to the sponsors who made this event possible. Advent Health, Career Source, Flagler Volusia, SMA Healthcare, Magellan Complete Care, Department of Children and Families, and the House Next Door. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the presenter, Julie Barrow. All right. It's all yours, Julie.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Mindfulness 101. I kind of hate going after Dr. Carrioth. She was actually one of my professors, and some of her graduate students were my major mentors when I went to Florida State University. I was in her death and dying class and went on to become a therapist myself and did quite a bit of specializing in grief work and trauma. And so I think today's session hopefully will just piggyback on a lot of the themes that you've already had today. And I will do just a brief introduction of what I do and how today's topic fits into my role, and we'll go from there. So first of all, before we start, since we're at the tail end of the day, you're an hour out of eating lunch, so let's just do a quick grounding exercise. If you will look around you, just find me five things that you see. So I see trees and clouds. I see my dying Mother's Day bouquet in front of me. I see my laptop, and I see some familiar faces and names and some friends from long ago, and then some people I wish I could introduce myself and sit down and talk to you. Four things that I can feel. I can feel the fan blowing on my skin. I can feel the chair that's both soft and hard that I'm sitting on. If I switch to things I can hear that fan. I can hear my own voice all by myself because we're virtual. And things I can smell the watermelon that I cut for my lunch, and then I can taste that watermelon on my mouth. And so what we just did together was we practiced our first mindfulness exercise. And whether you are working with staff or you're working with families or an individual, this is such an easy tool to start any session with. Whether it's opening a board meeting, you can make it a little more sophisticated. But what we just did is we took ourselves from out here in the nebula, or our thought life, or what we have to do after this meeting, and we all came together for a moment inside our own bodies, and we're now in our frontal cortex. We're ready to learn together and participate. If you have an office, there's a reason kids like Elf on a Shelf. They want to see something, they want to discover something every day. That's a great way to ground yourself in your presence, is to put items in your room or smells or something new that really grounds you in your space. And so a little bit about SEDNET and the office that I work for. We are a special project of the Department of Education, and we specifically serve our emotionally and behaviorally disturbed students, creating a network that supports their complex needs. And so if you're on the Health and Human Services Summit today, then you're part of my network, and I want to get to know you because I know you'll be able to help support our system of care and support the students and the families that I serve. And so some of those partners are education, mental health, substance abuse, juvenile justice, child welfare, and families and youth, because unfortunately our students with emotional and behavioral disturbances end up touching these systems of care at a far greater rate than our typical students. And there's one of me all across our great state of Florida, and our work together helps improve graduation rates and decrease dropout rates. So I love quotes, and one of the quotes that has resonated with me as we're kind of transcending time and space through all we've been through the last 14 months is, we are all weathering this same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And mindfulness really helps us connect to the storm we're weathering and the boat we're sitting in. And so together, hopefully we're going to go on a bit of a journey here of self-discovery and look at some tools to identify both the storms and the boat that we're in. And this is another quote for all of you caregivers, and it resonates with me, and it may with you too, but sometimes you can get so busy trying to be everyone else's anchor that you don't realize you're actually drowning. So I hope in the next 30, 40 minutes today that this is your protected hour, that this is your time to carve out some space. And this really does belong to you. The tools that we'll share today, I'm hoping you'll be able to use in your practices, whether it's at home or within your service delivery. So some of our goals today is just to introduce what mindfulness is as a self-regulation tool and how it promotes resilience and combats toxic stress. I'm hoping that you all will carve out some time for yourselves to identify your own wellness and how are you doing. And we want you to be able to put on that oxygen mask that they tell you you have to put on when you're on the airplane before you put it on someone else. And then hopefully you'll be able to access the tools that we share. And so when we think about mindfulness, it really falls under an umbrella. And I like this definition for caregivers because the first one is mindfulness is just simply paying attention. So that exercise we did right at the beginning, we just stopped. That took what, 30 seconds, a minute, and we paid attention to our surroundings in the present moment. It's very simple. That's being mindful. We live in a world where we are surrounded by imagery, demands. I know earlier today, I was watching Dr. Carrie out on my phone. I was preparing the message. I was answering emails. I was talking to people in the room. I was doing so many different things, and I wasn't paying attention in the moment. I was scattered all over the place. And when we are scattered, we're weaker. We're not as strong. The second part that I love so much, and if you take nothing else away from today's topic on mindfulness, is that we don't want to just pay attention. We want to pay attention to what is going on within ourselves without judgment or resistance. I have worked, whether it's in ministry or as a therapist, for almost 30 years. And I will say that whether it's a spiritual realm or our mental and intellectual self realm, that shame and judgment are really the anchor points of almost every bit of suffering, social emotional suffering that I have walked through with people. And so what mindfulness is taking it from, we pay attention to it, and then we do it without judgment. And what I like to think of is, if you picture your very best friend or someone that you care for and take care of, and you think about how you think of that person, you think of them in a positive light. You expect the best, you see the best, you don't judge them, you don't shame them. And if you've ever done a stream of consciousness or written down your thoughts, I know if you're like me, a lot of my thoughts aren't very kind to myself. And so this M2 part of being mindful to our experiences is really removing the judgment from it. And what I tell my students is that you are now going to become a social scientist. And I use the word or the phrase, how interesting. That's my judgment removal. So I might have a thought or an experience that's really loaded, and instead of attaching judgment or blame or shame, I simply am going to sit with that thought and think, how interesting. Then if we are the caregivers that we are, we want to take mindfulness to the next step. And this is where we are relating to the experiencer with the desire to alleviate their sufferings. And so a lot of the tools we'll go over here today are for just that. They're free resources that you'll be able to share or use with your own self. And the key word there is just compassion. I feel with you and alongside of you, and I want to support you and what you're going through. And then the last one is where we bring the two together, where we understand what we're feeling and going through without judgment, while supporting someone else going through their own experience. And that's where you really leave as the wise person. You are filled with wisdom, and you have something that you're going to be able to offer other people. That it really is a rare quality these days to be able to sit with someone, experience with someone, support someone and what they're going through. And so Dr. Shauna Shapiro does a really great job sharing through a TED Talk what mindfulness looks like. So I'm going to share a video, and we did practice. I'm going to give this, and if any of you are on screen and the video.
If, in rush hour traffic, you can remain perfectly calm, if you can see your neighbors travel to fantastic places without a twinge of jealousy, if you can love everyone around you unconditionally, and if you can always find contentment just where you are, then you're probably a dog, right? We hold ourselves to these unrealistic standards of perfection, and then we judge ourselves when we don't live up to them. The thing is, we're not supposed to be perfect. Perfection isn't possible. But transformation is. All of us have the capacity to change, to learn, and to grow, no matter what our circumstances. As a professor and scientist, I study how people change, how people transform. And one of the most effective vehicles I've found is mindfulness. My own journey into mindfulness was unexpected. When I was 17, I had spinal fusion surgery, a metal rod put in my spine. I went from a healthy, active teenager to lying in a hospital bed, unable to walk. And during the many months of rehabilitation, I tried to figure out how to live in this body that could no longer do what it used to. The physical pain was difficult, but worse was the fear and the loneliness. And I simply didn't have the tools to cope. So I began searching for something that could help. And eventually this search led me to a monastery in Thailand for my first meditation retreat. At the monastery, the monks didn't speak much English, and I didn't speak any Thai, but I understood mindfulness had something to do with paying attention in the present moment. My only instruction was to feel the breath going in and out of my nose. So I began. 1 breath, 2 breaths. My mind wandered off. I brought it back. 1 breath, 2 breaths. It wandered again, sucked into the past or lost in the future. And no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't stay present. Now this was frustrating because I thought meditation was supposed to feel like this. And instead, it felt more like this. Right? Being present isn't so easy. In fact, check it out for yourself. I've been speaking for about 3 minutes. Have you noticed your mind has wandered? All of our minds wander. Research from Harvard shows the mind wanders on average 47% of the time. 47%. That's almost half of our lives that we're missing, that we're not here. So part of mindfulness is simply learning to train the mind in how to be here where we already are. Like right now. Let's practice together. Allow your eyes to close and just feel your feet on the floor. Wiggle your toes and sense your whole body sitting here, softening the face, softening the jaw, and notice that you're breathing, feeling the breath as it naturally flows in and out of the body, just being here. And as you're ready, taking a deeper breath in and out, allowing your eyes to open. So, back at the monastery, I was trying hard to do just this, to just be present. But no matter how hard I tried, my mind kept wandering off. And at this point, I really started to judge myself. What is wrong with you? You're terrible at this. Why are you even here? You're a fake. And then not only was I judging myself, I started judging everyone, even the monks. Why are they just sitting here? Shouldn't they be doing something? Thankfully, a monk from London arrived who spoke English. And as I shared with him my struggles, he looked at me and said, "Oh dear, you're not practicing mindfulness. You're practicing judgment, impatience, frustration." And then he said 5 words that have never left me. What you practice grows stronger. What you practice grows stronger. We know this now with neuroplasticity. Our repeated experiences shape our brain. We can actually sculpt and strengthen our synaptic connections based on repeated practice. For example, in the famous study of London taxi drivers, the visual spatial mapping part of the brain is bigger, stronger. They've been practicing navigating the 25,000 streets of London all day long. When you look at the brains of meditators, the areas related to attention, learning, compassion grow bigger and stronger. It's called cortical thickening, the growth of new neurons in response to repeated practice. What we practice grows stronger. The monk explained to me that if I was meditating with judgment, I was just growing judgment. Meditating with frustration, I'm growing frustration. He helped me understand that mindfulness isn't just about paying attention. It's about how we pay attention, with kindness. He said it's like these loving arms that welcome everything, even the messy, imperfect parts of ourselves. He also pointed out that we're practicing all the time, moment by moment, not just when we're meditating, but in every moment. We're growing something in every moment. So the question really becomes, what do you want to grow? What do you want to practice? When I left Thailand, I wanted to keep practicing mindfulness, and I wanted to understand it scientifically. So I began a PhD program, eventually became a professor, and I've spent the past 20 years investigating the effects of mindfulness across a wide range of populations, including veterans with PTSD, patients with insomnia, women with breast cancer, stressed out college students, high-level business executives. And over, the data showed 2 key things. First, mindfulness works. It's good for you. It strengthens our immune functioning, it decreases stress, decreases cortisol, helps us sleep better. When we published our first research back in '98, there were only a handful of studies. Now there are thousands of studies showing the beneficial effects of mindfulness. It's good for us. The second thing we learned was quite unexpected. Almost all the people we were working with, regardless of their age, their gender, their background, were talking about the same thing. This underlying sense of, I'm not good enough, I'm not okay, I'm not living this life right. This tremendous self-judgment and shame. And we all know what they were talking about, because shame is universal. All of us feel it. And worse, we have this mistaken belief that if we shame ourselves, if we beat ourselves up, we'll somehow improve. And yet, shame doesn't work. Shame never works. It can't work. Literally, physiologically, it can't work, because when we feel shame, the centers of the brain that have to do with growth and learning shut down. This fMRI shows the brain on shame. What happens is the amygdala triggers a cascade of norepinephrine and cortisol to flood our system, shutting down the learning centers and shuttling our resources to survival pathways. Shame literally robs the brain of the energy it needs to do the work of changing. And worse, when we feel shame, we want to avoid it. So we hide from those parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, the parts that most need our attention. It's just too painful to look at them. So what's the alternative? Kind attention. First, kindness gives us the courage to look at those parts of ourselves we don't want to see. And second, kindness bathes us with dopamine, turning on the learning centers of the brain and giving us the resources we need to change. True and lasting transformation requires kind attention. And the monk's words echoed in my ears. Mindfulness isn't just about attention, it's about kind attention. This attitude of kindness wasn't just a footnote or something nice to have, it was an essential part of the practice, a part of mindfulness that's so often overlooked. So my colleagues and I developed a model of mindfulness that explicitly includes our attitude and our intention, as well as our attention. All three parts working together synergistically. Put simply, mindfulness is intentionally paying attention with kindness. We used this model while working at the Veterans Hospital for a group of men with PTSD. I was shocked to learn that we lose more veterans to suicide each year than to combat. Much pain and shame. So the intention of the mindfulness group was to cultivate this kind attention, even for the seemingly unforgivable parts of ourselves. There was one man in the group who never said a word, never looked up. 2 months passed, he seemed unreachable. And then one day he raised his hand and he said, "I don't want to get better. What I saw in the war, what I did, I don't deserve to get better." He then looked down at the floor and proceeded to tell us in great detail what he had seen and what he had done. And I can still feel the horror of what he shared and how his shame filled the room. I looked up to see how the other men were responding, and there was no judgment, only compassion on their faces. I invited him to look up and to witness this compassion and this kindness. And as he slowly looked around the room, his face began to soften. And in his eyes, there was hope. The possibility that he wasn't just his past actions, that he could choose differently now, that he could change. And this may be one of the most important things I've learned. It's that transformation is possible for all of us, no matter what. And it requires kind attention, not shame. And this kind attention takes practice. It takes lots of practice. I want to share with you a simple practice that continues to help me. Some years ago, I was going through a difficult divorce, and I'd wake up every morning with this pit of shame in my stomach. My meditation teacher suggested an explicit practice of kind attention. She said, "How about saying, 'I love you, Shauna,' every day?" I thought to myself, no way. It felt so contrived. She saw my hesitation and suggested, "How about just saying, 'Good morning, Shauna?' Oh, and try putting your hand on your heart when you say it. It releases oxytocin. It's good for you, you know." She knew the science would win me over. So the next day, put my hand on my heart, took a breath, and said, "Good morning, Shauna." And it was kind of nice. I continued to practice, and a month later when I saw her, I admitted how helpful it had been. "Wonderful, you've graduated," she said. "Now, the advanced practice. Good morning, I love you, Shauna." So the next day, put my hand on my heart, anchored myself, and said, "Good morning, I love you, Shauna." I felt nothing, except maybe a little ridiculous, but definitely not love. But I kept practicing because, as we know, what we practice grows stronger. And then one day I put my hand on my heart, took a breath. "Good morning, I love you, Shauna." And I felt it. I felt my grandmother's love. I felt my mother's love. I felt my own self-love. And I wish I could tell you that every day since then has been this bubble of self-love and I've never felt shame or judgment again, and that's not true. But what is true is this pathway of kind attention has been established, and it's growing stronger every day. So I want to invite you tomorrow to put your hand on your heart and say good morning. And if you're really brave, good morning, I love you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing in that moment with me, just to kind of review Shauna's experience with mindfulness. And I love that this isn't something that we're sharing about. I would say 5-10 years ago that people would talk about mindfulness as a form of mysticism. And what I love is that it is a science. And it's one of the tools that we can put in our quiver. Dr. Carrioff was talking about grief and trauma. And many of us are supporting many people who have been traumatized. And so using mindfulness techniques first to strengthen ourselves and then to support others is one of the many tools we can put in our arsenal or our quiver. And it really stems from the stress that we feel when we have an experience. And so trauma, as Dr. Carrioff was sharing, isn't the experience itself, but it is the stress that is prolonged, and it actually has embedded itself into our neurophysiology. And it can be challenging because it changes things. And I just wanted to give you a snapshot of why it's so important for us to provide our students and our caregivers with different tools that resonate them with, because there is so much stress going on. And this is some of the data that just came out in our 2020 FACIS. And for the first time, they have added ACEs data, the what has happened to you data, into the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey. And before COVID, we knew that every 4 children attending our school systems have been exposed to some traumatic event that has the potential of impacting their behavior, their emotions. And so when we look at our population, that means that 244,259 students are currently at risk for developing some sort of serious mental health issues as a repercussion of the trauma that they have experienced. And this is an oversimplification, but what can happen is if we persevere on something that has happened in our past, that can stem the trickle down into a depression. If we persevere and worry and have concerns about what is going to happen next based on the traumas that we have experienced in the past, that's where anxiety starts taking root. And so these adverse experiences not only affect our emotions, but have negative health outcomes, negative behavioral outcomes. It's very difficult for our students and just our fellow employees who we work beside, or the clients that we're serving, to have meaningful relationships, to grow and transcend, as Shauna was talking about, having that growth when they are stuck in their trauma. And so I wanted to share with you just some results so you have in your mind what our young people are going through. And the 10 questions of the ACEs have to do with, have you ever experienced an emotional abuse? And this is students up to 18 years old. 15.7% said they did last year during this survey in the state of Florida. 10.5 had experienced physical abuse, 5.5 sexual abuse. 40% have parents that are either separated or divorced. 8.8% have experienced or were experiencing physical abuse in their household. 26.8% were experiencing substance abuse in their household. Mental illness in their household is even higher at 30%. And as many of us know, those are very frequently co-occurring disorders. This blows my mind. Almost 27% of our young people have an incarcerated household member. That means a member of their household is incarcerated. 29.2% are experiencing emotional neglect, and almost 7.5% physical neglect. And so when we look at the need to respond with kindness, mindfully, to our students and their families who are also part of this trauma, then we realize how important it is to take that moment and to take stock and what are we doing inside our thoughts, and how are we teaching those around us to be at peace with themselves, to be safe in their own skin. And as we know, the behavioral and social emotional impacts of trauma are more detrimental the more ACEs that we have. And so 21.7% of Florida students who took the survey had experienced 4 or more ACEs. And if you correlate that with substance use, that you can see how it just goes up. And our young people and our fellow adults are using substances to take away their shame, to take away their pain. And we want to be able to help them feel comfortable in their own skins. So what I'd like to do with our remaining time is I'm just going to go through some free tools that you have at the tip of your fingertips that can help anchor you in emotional wellness, and that you will be able to share. And the reason we want to do that is because participating in these activities, the more self-aware we are, the more we're able to self-regulate. And trauma kind of hijacks, and toxic stress, it hijacks our brains. It hijacks our thoughts. And so the more we are centered in the present, the more powerful we are to engage in our social relationships, the more we're able to learn and grow, as Shauna was talking about, that transcendence. The more our stress levels will decrease, our agitation, our anger, our inattention to the present. And so what we'll look at here is just being willing to do a self-checkup. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so every year I do a huge focus throughout the month with all the people that I care on just like you get your teeth cleaned twice a year, some of us, not me, but we're supposed to go to the doctor at least once a year. And we need to do a self-checkup. We need to be willing to sit inside and take some time out and say, how am I doing? And then we want to mindfully engage in strategies that work for us. And each one of us, I wish we had time in the chat. And if you want to even start putting some things in the chat of your go-to self-care, I think all of us would love to hear that. And then part of Mental Health Awareness Month for me and mindfulness is taking away the shame of what our own experiences are, and we talk about it. We talk about it to our doctors. We talk about it to our trusted family and friends, and our safe places. And we want to make sure that we're just prepared. And so some of the self-check-ins, if you have a phone, I know some of you are watching this on your phone, so it might be difficult to do, but if you have a phone, I just want to do a quick challenge that you type in your Google chat or your Google bar or anywhere else that you're able to do this on your laptop, your computer screen. Just type in MHA screens. So MHA screens, and Mental Health America has an entire toolkit devoted to helping us do some very simple screens. And just like cancer, if we catch it at stage 4, it is so much more difficult to treat. But if we catch it in stage 1, a lot of times we don't even need chemo or radiation. We're able to take some steps to intervene. And the same with mental health. The longer we let things go, the more difficult it is to treat. And so it's so important that we're willing to take stock. So if you just typed in MHA screens, these tools will come up, and this is a great way to dive in and just see, how am I doing? Anxiety test, depression test, parent test, youth test, PTSD test, addiction test. And in any one of these that you feel like, wow, I'm wondering how I'm doing here, it will then, after you take it, pop up with more questions, and then it will take you to more resources. And so this is a great way. Last year during COVID, I took the stress test. So you would just type in your browser, MHA stress test, and it asks you some simple questions, and it helps me when as much as a therapist, I am great at drawing other people out. I don't know if you all resonate with this as caregivers, but we often don't want to talk about ourselves, or we don't want to get in touch with ourselves because we're so busy taking care of everyone else. And so I love being asked questions, and I get to think, how interesting. I do feel this way, or I have experienced that. And so what I found is that I was in trouble after I took that stress test. And instead of being in judgment, I really was able to sit back and say, how interesting, and do an assessment of what I've been going through, and then put into practice things that were meaningful to me. And so what Shauna said is, what you focus on grows. And then I like this quote because it expands on it. What you think about and focus on grows. It expands, and what you dwell upon determines your destiny. And so in practicing mindfulness, instead of worrying about what's going to happen or perseverating on what has already happened, we get to sit with ourselves and decide, what do we want to happen? And what do we want to focus on? And that's where that power goes from. And what we're doing in those mindful moments is we're hijacking our stress response system. Because I don't know, even before I did this, I could tell my palms were starting to get a little damp. I could tell that my heart rate was escalating as Dr. Carrioth was talking, and I knew I needed to jump over, and my heart rate was increasing. I was not taking relaxing breaths. And so my body kind of hijacked myself. It's an automatic response. I had no control over that. Or did I? When we're mindful, we're able to reduce our own stress by taking those 10 deep breaths, by centering ourselves in our thoughts and saying, well, Julie, of course you're stressed. You're getting ready to do a presentation. You've never done this before in this format with these listeners, with this audience, right after the keynote speaker. Of course you would be stressed. That's completely normal. Let's take a couple cleansing breaths. Let's say some kind things about myself and about the audience, that the whole reason I want to do this is if I could give you the world, I would. And so giving gives me joy. And so thinking about just giving you some tools that you would have at the tip of your fingertips makes me feel good. And I could feel my heart rate decreasing and my blood pressure stopping the boiling. My breathing started to become more natural. My shoulders dropped down. And it was intentional, and I was mindfully in control of my response. Now, was I still nervous? Did it take that away? No. Here, many of us have started using biofeedback as a way to mindfully regulate, where we are able to see our heart rate or our breathing up on a screen, or many of us wear watches or have apps on our phones. And you can just look at these two graphs of when our heart rate is out of sync. And then when we practice mindful appreciation and kindness, how our heart rate actually gets into a coherent rhythm. And when we get dysregulated, that can follow us, 4 to 6 hours into our day after a stress response. And so really being able to take that 5-10 minutes, even the 1-minute grounding exercise we did with some breathing, and kind thoughts, loving thoughts, supportive thoughts, encouraging thoughts, the thoughts that you would give to your best friend or your most loved person, can actually help you regulate. Just to further encourage you to go on that MHA website, you will be able to pull up all kind of printables that help direct you to mindful practices. Here's just some sheets like PATH, if any of you like to use acronyms to remember what you're supposed to do next when you get stressed. This is a great one. PATH is pause. Just stop for a moment and don't stuff, but sit in whatever you're feeling with kindness. Acknowledge the feelings, and then take a few minutes to figure out what you're in control with. What do you want to do? And then either practice that self-help or get help from the people that care about you the most. Or you can pay someone to help you. We have multiple tools. And so dealing with tough thoughts, looking for the good, again, when we practice that positivity, that is a form of mindfulness, and it helps our whole nervous system to come into appreciation and kindness. Detoxifying your life, that's a great way to get all of kind of that yuck out. Planning a routine and getting some control. So these are all just samples of the free tools that are available just by going on that MAJ. You all have a copy of this presentation right in the notes that you can pull down, and I try to make sure that there were live links. Another great self-assessment for those of us who are caregivers and who are supporting others with a lot of compassion is taking the ProQual 5, the professionally qualified lifestyle, quality of life scale. This is a great tool. If you've never done this, again, this is 1 or 2 times a year. It's an awesome way just to say, how am I doing? How's my compassion satisfaction? Like I said, for me, I do get great joy on giving, but I would say this month I have my limits. I've overgiven, I've overcommitted, and so I would say my compassion satisfaction might my score might be a little low. I just had a Facebook person, apparently their account got hacked, and someone just told me they just got out of jail and they needed money. Literally 10 minutes before this came on, and I was like, I can't take care of one more person. And so how is our compassion satisfaction? Could it turn into compassion fatigue where helping is starting to hurt and harm, and are we at risk of burnout? And so I do want to just encourage you to take a moment and do that. Also in the notes section where you can pull down, this is a sheet that I provided live links. I will say the coolest thing that has come out of COVID is there are so many amazing groups and amazing resources that have all gone online, and they're at the tip of our fingertips. And so I have just provided you on that sheet with live links to all kind of mindfulness tools to use for both yourself and those. And so this is some of the ones that I've gone to for students. So if you all haven't started adult coloring, I highly recommend it. Not all of us are good at guiding our own relaxation. So having guided relaxation done for you, journaling tips, getting yourself up and moving just for 5 minutes. So this is just some examples. If you click on any of those links, it will open up to even more links where it takes you to sounds and music. It'll take you to guided meditations. One of the things that I love is animals. That's one of the ways that I have done my mindful moments as I go out into nature and I'm just quiet and I observe, and it fills my cup. And so they have live animal cams. Many of us haven't been able to get out in nature or travel like we used to. So you can go on virtual museum tools. You can put together puzzles were sold out on Amazon during the COVID madness. And so there are puzzles and games you can do right online, healthy cooking, yoga. So I just want to encourage you to take some time. Some other things you'll find in the downloadable PowerPoint is many of you operate social media or like to send things in your emails. So I got permission from the Fresh Check Day Jordan Porker Foundation to share some of these tiles that we can drop in just to send reminders to those that we're supporting and working with. One of my favorite websites over the last year has been actionforhappiness.org. It has all kind of tools. And every month they give you a new calendar with a mindful moment or challenge. And so we're on the 12th today. And so our mindful moment and meaningful May would be to listen to a favorite piece of music and remember what it means to you. And so this is just something you can do for yourself, something that you can share with other people, just to have a constant practice of kindness, of believing that you deserve happiness and joy in your moments, and that it doesn't happen by accident, that it's something that we have to be very intentional about. One of the things for those of you who are faith-based, just realizing that there are all kind of research-based tools now out there for that, as well as DCF has started at my Florida family faith-based resource group. And so now there are tools out there for our families to connect that way. And so just a reminder that just as we're doing these self-check-ins, that we do want to be able to share this. When we go to the doctor's office, how is our stress level? If we took an inventory and we were really anxious, or we were finding that maybe we have some post-secondary trauma, that's something that we just shatter stigma by talking about it with our medical practitioners at our fingertips. We're able to find not only friend support and peer support, but also professional support is sometimes needed. And many of us have EAP plans that we can utilize. If you've never been on Psychology Today to find a therapist, they have videos where you can listen and hear and see if you would resonate with that person. We have our 2-on-1 where you can find all kind of resources. And as a helper and a caregiver, I do make it a practice that I keep 1-800 numbers and text lines in my phone so that I'm able to hand them off at any given notice to the people that I am supporting. And these are just some other tools that will be linked in the presentation when you pull it down. So I do want to go ahead and just let you know those are all going to be there right at your fingertips. And just as a reminder, as part of our mindfulness, that we are not able to control all the things that are going on around us, but we can control ourselves. And mindfulness really is about that kind approach to ourselves, to our thoughts, to our words, to our choices, to our actions, to how we want to react, and to our future. So I really appreciate you all being with me for these mindful moments. I hope you are able to just take advantage of some of the tools that they do support and sustain your work. And I am open for any questions at this time, and hopefully we'll be able to get you out a little bit early.
Well, Julie, I'm going to read through some of the comments you got as you were giving your presentation as well. AZ in Savage said, thank you so much for sharing that video. Allison, when you were given some of your statistics, she had mentioned that those were just the ones that were reported with a sad face. Jessica said that the calendar that you put up is a great idea for the happiness calendar. Allison also said, great job, Julie. I needed this. Kathy, it was great, Julie. Very helpful. Okay, so I guess the hands that went up are now down, so they must have said what they wanted to say.
All right, well, you're welcome to raise those hands or share. This is absolutely a safe place. I am a hugger by nature, so I hope you feel that I'm going around the virtual room hugging all of you and appreciating you being here.
Here we go. Kathy has a question.
Yes, thank you. Julie, I just wanted to say that I'd like to follow up as much as I can. And where did you say the links? We could find the links to some of these materials?
For this particular course that you selected, there should also be, I was only able to put in 3 documents. So I did put in a PDF of this presentation, and I did try to make all the links in the PDF live, so you'd be able to connect to them. And then I also put in there the sheet that will then bounce you off to quite a few of the things. It's like a 1-pager with PDF links. So in the Whova app, under this course, there should be 3 documents. I can see it on my phone.
So the only way we can get it is that Hijacking thing, because I didn't even use it. It was impossible for me today. Is there any other way to get them?
My email is up on the screen, and you are welcome to reach out to me. I am an oversharer, so I will not only send you those documents, or probably more. So you are welcome. Just shoot me an email, remind me of maybe what resonated with you or what you'd like, and I'll get that right over to you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
All right, and then several other people are saying, thank you for the resources and great insights. I don't think, and that was all the hands that were raised. So with that, I guess I will do our closing. Any insights for helping with bereavement and loss? Hello?
I'm here, and
Okay.
I appreciate that question, because I do think when we're still and when we're sitting in our pain, that's probably one of the hardest things to do. And I think when you're mindfully grieving, that's taking your own temperature on how you're doing. And if it's a significant loss, that it can impact your ability to work and perform and engage in meaningful relationships. So I think the big part of it is just normalizing that grief is like quicksand. It can slow you down. It can be incapacitating, and that is a normal social emotional response to loss and losing a piece of yourself. I would say paying attention to your own symptoms and how much is it impacting what your daily living. And if you're finding that over time that it is impacting your daily living, there are so many resources out there. Feeling not alone. There's all kind of bereavement groups we have through our hospice programs. Wonderful groups. A lot of faith-based organizations have groups that are, and now most of them are online, so it in some ways makes it safer to reach out. So I would just really pay attention. First of all, normalize the fact that it is very difficult. But the second part is kind of using these steps is that don't do it alone. Talk to people that you feel safe with, recognize your own symptoms, and if they are debilitating, then feel great about getting help. Feel courageous about getting support. And I will tell you, the more vulnerable sometimes we are, the more we help someone else who is going through the same exact thing. So I think part of that courage is just paying attention, and knowing it's not easy. And again, you can take my email, and I'm happy to share resources as well. I know that's just a small answer without knowing all the circumstances. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, it's like we gotta end this to get ready for the next meeting that's coming up. Thank you, Julie, for such a great session. Thank you for the information. Thank you all for attending the session today. I am going to end the meeting now. Please navigate back to our event platform on Whova or to our virtual event planner to join your next session. All right, thanks again. Appreciate it, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you.